Welcome back. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to talk about a very important topic when it comes to developing APIs, which is handling errors. Whenever you are building an API, it's important to handle errors because your endpoints will not always return data, will not always return what the user is hoping for. Therefore, whenever you have an error, it's better to customize that error, and return a specific message with a specific information to let the user know what happened. And this is useful in many cases. And in our case, we have here get movie by title. For example, whenever the user is trying to get a movie, and if that movie doesn't exist, it's super important to let the user know that this movie doesn't exist rather than returning nothing. For example, if I say here, let me refresh and show you an example. If I say here, if I search for movie that doesn't exist, for example, here any characters, and if I click on execute, this is obviously going to return internal server error, and it's going to return 500. If the user is a developer, they will probably understand that this movie doesn't exist. However, if the user is not a tech savvy, if the user is not a developer, they will not understand what that means. Therefore, it's better to return a message that lets the user know what happened, and that can be done using error handling techniques. So let's do this. In our application now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to import a, a fast API class called HTTP exception. Exception. This HTTP exception. This HTTP exception is going to allow us to return a specific piece of data or message to the user in case something undesirable happen. So here, in case we are returning a movie title, if that movie doesn't exist, we need to let the user know that this movie doesn't exist and they should search for another movie. So here what we can do is that we can say if movie if length movie is equal to 0, then we can return a customized message, because here this movie is gonna return an array. This returns an array with the result. So in this example, we are returning an array of a single array, and we are here fetching that single element from that array. But in case the length movie is equal to 0, in other words, in case that array is empty, it means that the movie doesn't exist. And to handle this, we can say raise HTTP exception, and then this HTTP exception takes two parameters. The first parameter is the status code, and that status code can be anything. It can be, of course, not. It shouldn't be 200, because 200 it means success, and typically it's 500 in case this doesn't, in case something error happens, or 400, sometimes 400. There is a list of status codes, and the 200 usually means, and always 200 always means success. 300 means redirect. 400 means some type of error. 500 means internal server error. I'm gonna be using 500 for the sake of simplicity. And then the second parameter is the details, and then is equal to, and then the message. Here detail, and then the error message. Here our error message is movie not found. Very simple. Movie not found. And you can repeat this technique with any endpoint you want. For example, in case with the movie ID, you can do the same. You can repeat this code, because the handling error is going to be similar. And this raise this raise HTTP exception is going to be executed and no further code will be executed. So we don't have to worry about anything else. Let me now save and test. Let me click on File, Save All, and test. Now let's search, let me refresh and let's search for a movie that doesn't exist. So let me here refresh. And here I should say raise. Here should say raise. So I have a spelling error. I should say raise. Let me refresh one more time. And let's search for a movie that doesn't exist. Now if I here say, let's just type a random string and let me click on execute. And as you can see now, what I'm gonna get is that I'm gonna get detail movie not found rather than the internal server error that I got earlier. So this is how you can handle errors very simply using the HTTP exception class. And again, there is no specific way of doing this. It depends upon your code, your structure, your algorithm. So here in our case, we are returning an array. Therefore, we need to check whether this array is empty or not. In other cases, you might be returning a string. So in case you are returning a string, you might need to check whether that string is empty or not. So it depends upon how you are and the way you are typing your code. But in all circumstances, in case there is an error, you can always use this piece of code raise exception, HTTP exception, and then the status code that you want. Typically it's 500 or 400. It depends upon the whether it's internal server error or client error. And the detail is the message that you want to let the user know, or the message that you want to return to the user.